Welcome back to Nature News for the week of September 4th. This is your rundown of climate, science, and environmental news, and I'm your host, Alice Ford. As I've said in the past weeks, air pollution is extremely detrimental to our health. And now scientists have linked a common pollutant to an 11% higher rate of virus deaths in COVID-19 patients. Emory University researchers have tied a modest increase in nitrogen dioxide exposure to a markedly higher death rate from the virus-borne illness. Now, this may help explain higher death rates in parts of Arizona, California, and the New York City metro area that have had historically high amounts of NO2 pollution. Nitrogen dioxide, or NO2, is a respiratory irritant. It actually contributes to the formation of smog and acid rain, and it's primarily spewed into the atmosphere by cars, trucks, and coal-fired power plants. Now, researchers in England had already previously posited a similar connection to COVID-19, but this appears to be the first nationwide American inquiry into a possible link between PM 2.5 and COVID deaths. This needs further study to be absolutely clear, but these are very interesting findings that make a lot of sense from what we know about air pollution and health. And while many cities around the world have seen huge improvements in air quality as a result of the lockdowns and restrictions, some communities and cities are big outliers. One of those is Jakarta, Indonesia. Now, a new study shows that PM 2.5, yes, the same thing we were just talking about, which as we know is linked to higher deaths and health issues, has also been shown in extremely high levels in this city. Now, the pollution is coming from coal-fired power plants, which are all within about 60 miles of the city. And the city actually plans to build more of these in the coming years. Now, Jakarta is currently already one of the world's most polluted cities. Last year alone, they had 172 days of unhealthy air, which may not be a surprise when you hear these findings. Only 1 in 10 of the world's electricity utilities are prioritizing investment in clean renewable energy. This is a worrying gap between what is needed to tackle climate change and what is actually being done. Now, this new study of more than 3,000 utilities found that most of these utilities remain heavily invested in fossil fuels, despite the international efforts to reduce greenhouse gases. Of these companies, about 2% of these plants are expanding coal-fired power plants, which are mostly located in China, India, Indonesia, and Vietnam, while about 10% are favoring gas-fired power plants. So it seems that most countries and utilities are a lot of talk with no real action. One coalition of companies and cities hopes to help our issues with air pollution and even help in some of the racial injustices this country faces by planting trees. Specifically, they committed to planting and restoring 855 million of them by 2030 as part of the Trillion Trees Initiative, which is a global push to encourage reforestation to capture carbon and slow the effects of global heating. This was actually announced on Thursday of last week. It's the first nationwide pledge to the program, and additionally noteworthy because the U.S. group, which includes Microsoft Corporation and MasterCard, will focus on urban plantings as a means of improving air quality in communities that have been disproportionately affected by pollution and climate change. Do you want to get more involved in helping the planet and educating others on the importance of protecting it? Well, then make sure you hit that subscribe button and share this video with a friend. And don't forget to tag Nature News on Instagram and Twitter to share important stories in your own backyard. Have you ever seen a river of flames? Well, I certainly hope not, but people in Ohio have. The Cuyahoga River has caught on fire more than a dozen times over the last 75 years. But surprisingly, in March 2019, fish caught in this river were declared safe to eat by the federal environmental regulators. It was a major milestone in the river's recovery, which was once the most polluted waterway in the country. Back in 1969, the river caught fire, sparking public outrage and a reckoning on water pollution, which eventually led to the creation of the Clean Water Act, the Environmental Protection Agency, and even Earth Day. Well, earlier this year, the Cuyahoga River caught fire yet again. This time it was after a fuel tanker accident that spilled oil and gas through storm drains into the river. While it was quickly put out, it was a huge reminder that much of the progress we've made in this country on water pollution during the last 51 years is rapidly being undone. And if you're wondering what has changed in the Clean Water Act, well, I'm going to tell you. Late last year, the Trump administration made changes to the Clean Water Act. It stripped its protections from 60% of streams in this country, along with 110 million acres of wetlands. At the same time, it restricted the ability of state governments to regulate their own waterways. And before that, it revoked a proposed rule aimed at limiting water pollution caused by sewage treatment plants and eliminated an established rule which stopped coal companies from dumping waste into water sources. And this is the water that we end up drinking, that we end up bathing our children in, and among other things. Now, all three actions directly threatened our water in this country and the health of our nation. So, whatever you do, if you can speak to your local lawmakers about protecting our waterways, please do it. Let's talk about paper, because I learned something this week about the paper industry that honestly blew my mind. Now, paper can be made from a variety of different sources, but it's most often made from trees. One of the most sustainable sources, though, is actually hemp. 1 acre of hemp can actually produce as much paper as 4 to 10 acres of trees over a 20-year period. Hemp actually regrows quickly, like only in 4 months, while trees, they take decades. So why haven't we been using hemp to make paper products for the last 100+ years? Well, it all goes back to an agreement with DuPont Chemicals and William Hearst to stop the government from allowing hemp to be made so that they could profit off paper. Now, curiously enough, the Declaration of Independence was actually drafted on hemp paper and then copied to parchment. And paper made from hemp was used in ancient China and Egypt. So let's go back to that DuPont chemical. Back when President Hoover was in power in the 1930s, the owner of one of America's largest newspaper companies, William Hearst, you might recognize that name from Hearst Castle, invested in thousands upon thousands of acres of woodland in order to provide enough pulp for the newspaper industry. Well, he put a lot of money into this investment in timber, and he didn't want any competition. And at that time, hemp was a competition. He sought to dominate this. He formed an alliance with DuPont, a petrochemical company that also provided the means to turn wood fibers into paper through a sulfur-based chemical process. After realizing this competitive opponent that hemp posed to his investment, Hearst began an influential newspaper campaign to dissuade Americans from supporting the hemp industry. He lobbied the government, and he portrayed hemp as an extremely dangerous and malevolent drug. He weaved his agenda into the newspapers that he owned in a way that would appeal to the racial fears of the time period. If you didn't know, in the US, we actually lost 97% of our mature old-growth forests, so it would make sense for us to find some sort of other option. And while big agriculture is a bigger source of deforestation than paper globally, this is still something we should be very aware of and working together to reverse all the red tape that has really stopped hemp from being a viable source of paper goods in this country. So most of the hemp paper products we have in the US right now are actually imported from Canada and China. In 2018, they made some changes to the Farm Bill, which actually legalized hemp. But it didn't create an equal system with that and other crops like tomato, basil, etc. It's still highly regulated in the United States for both personal and industrial production, making it very difficult for us to transition over to hemp products. In a paper written by MIT alumni Julia Hill, she said that DuPont actually feared hemp for 2 reasons. Now, the first is that DuPont was in the process of making synthetic fibers for fabrics that could easily replace hemp if given a boost by the criminal justice system. Second was that DuPont held the process patent for turning wood pulp into paper. Because hemp is a superior product to wood pulp for paper production, not to mention more environmentally sustainable, DuPont had to create other plans for making sure hemp would not go to market. Now, there's a lot more information on this I'd love to talk about, and ties into the logging industry and lots of other stuff. So just super interesting. And hemp paper can actually be recycled up to 8 times, while tree paper can only be recycled 3 times. So it's far superior to trees. We should definitely start using it more in this country and just globally. And I'm apparently really on the paper trail today because I've got some more paper news for you. Over in Indonesia, a huge expanse of more than 8,600 acres of peat bogs were cleared by the paper giant APP. Now, this company actually made a commitment to sustainability and vowed not to cut down any natural forests or clear any more of these natural peat bogs. Peat bogs are actually massive carbon sinks, so cutting them down or burning them actually really is bad for the amount of emissions. They catch fire really easily when they're dried out, and where this one was located in Sumatra, it was home to lots of endangered species. Indigenous people all over the world have had to live in the shadow of polluting industries for decades. In Argentina, the oil and gas industry has irreversibly damaged the indigenous Mapuche's homeland. Companies such as Exxon, Chevron, and Total have moved into the area of the Mapuche people over the last several years, where they are fracking, drilling, and filling toxic waste ponds very close to the towns and populations where people live. This is polluting the water and the soil in those areas as well. Lastly, today you should all know that the Amazon rainforest is on fire yet again, and the people and animals there need our help. So if you'd like to learn more about rainforests and how you can help the Amazon, I would definitely urge you to connect with Rainforest Alliance and the Rainforest Action Networks to make a donation and learn some more information about that. Well, that's all I have for you this week. Have a great weekend, and don't forget to share this video with a friend, hit that subscribe button, and I will see you next week.